Ask you a question just to start. I think the film is, well, first of all, thank you for sharing it with us. I think it's so beautiful, and that you capture such an openness from the protagonist's part. And I was wondering if you'd want to tell us a bit about your process in making the film and collaborating with these people.
Sure, I'd love to. So the process, I mean, this was, so the film kind of announces its conceit. It's a film shot in one city over the course of 1 month. And it was always and very purposefully about talking to strangers and having encounters with people and trying to add up a series of digressions towards a portrait of what it's like to kind of bear this historical moment and, a set of crises that we're facing. So the process was kind of the film itself. I mean, there was a kind of method to it, which is somewhat hard to describe because it was, we really didn't, this isn't a film in which people were cast or in which people are chosen because of certain expertise. Instead, the point was really to meet people and find out what they're thinking about. And so a lot of the process involves sort of thinking about place, where to go, what sort of situations we might plant ourselves in that could allow us to, and me specifically, to approach people and say, hey, we're making this film about the summer and how people are doing. Would you have a conversation with us? And then the conversations themselves were deliberately open-ended. So I'd have a sort of series of questions that I'd ask everybody, but often I'd wait towards the end to ask those questions, and instead I'd try and sort of start a conversation and suss out what the person I was talking to wanted to talk about, which is a sort of hard thing to do. But the thing about making a film is that you get to be you get to be gifted with this excuse to have these conversations and find out how generous and complicated people are and how open they can be to talking to a stranger.
Did you have a set of guidelines in terms of where you would go in New York?
Well, we didn't have a set of guidelines, no. It was really about offering a portrait of a city that was as free as possible of a sort of set of cliches. Trying to think through, the ways in which people inhabit a place very differently, depending on what neighborhood they're in, what degrees of power they have, what kinds of experiences they have in their lives. So we're thinking across, class and race and age. But the point was really to sort of choose a place, in this place that, a city that's already, in a way paradigmatic of the kind of crises that a lot of cities in the world are facing in terms of growing inequality and racial violence. But also, New York is a seat of global power. It's surrounded by water. So really we were just thinking about, okay, how is this city already over imagined and full of, a set of stock cliches that we can try and deliberately avoid. So we spent a lot of time in the outer boroughs, especially because we wanted to show the different New Yorks that coexist at once.
I'm wondering about the role of the moon and Whimsy in this film, and also the dogs.
Well, the secret name for this film, among those in the know when we were making it, was the hottest doggest, because there were a lot of dogs, and most of them didn't make the final cut, unfortunately. I mean, the animals are really important in the film, right? So, the film is trying to do two things. Well, it's trying to do many things, but there's two sort of important things that it's trying to do at once. One is to bring us into this feeling of real sort of grounded intimacy, really trying to inhabit sort of the space and time of this 1 month, this one city, and mine really ordinary encounters and moments for kind of clues about the politics of this moment, but also to estrange us from our reality and remind us, and I think this is part of where the moon and the whimsy come in, remind us that we are, among other things, we're also creatures on a planet in a galaxy, and there's something totally wild about that and absurd about that, just as there's something wild and absurd and devastating about the fact that we're creatures on a planet who are killing the very thing that makes it able to live, right? So I wanted to use the sort of language of cinema to be playful, to have moments where we could laugh, and also to just play with strangeness, the strangeness that might allow us to sort of see what we see every day, as if from another time, or as if from another, maybe through the eyes of a duck, maybe through the eyes of someone, from the future who's come back. But the point being to reappraise the world as it appears to us, so that we might, remember that it could be different. It doesn't have to be this way.
What did you learn about filmmaking through this specific project, even if it's a little thing?
Yeah, what did I learn about filmmaking? It's funny, people do ask what I've learned, but not specifically about filmmaking. I mean, I think I don't know if this is about filmmaking or not. I feel like every time I make a film, but especially a film like this, in which, again, these encounters with people, these conversations are so central to what the film even is. There's no drama, right? There's no plot, there's no central characters. So if the film is anything, it's these sort of fragments of moving through space and encountering people. And making a film, and especially making a film like this, is always an antidote to a certain amount of despair with humankind that I might have, or misanthropy. And I'm always sort of surprised that people are willing to talk, and that they're willing to talk on camera. And I think the reason that they do is that I think there's a sort of terrible loneliness and terrible aloneness, and that people are actually very moved to want to connect. And so even if you approach someone, even with a camera, which you think would scare someone off, and say, I've got some genuine questions for you, I genuinely want to know what you have to say, people are extremely generous with themselves. And that's something I learned about filmmaking when I'm certainly through this project.
So what did you learn through I don't know how many people you spoke to?
We're 200 in the
200.
Yeah, but not, there's about 70 people in the film.
Where these 200 people are, sort of a general feeling, in this political time, and in this social time, and in this climate time, etc.
Yeah.
So what's your feeling for that?
Well, I think, I hope that's sort of a question that the film itself asks, and I hope that it offers lots of different interpretations and ways of sort of thinking about what it has to say about where people are at. But I feel like, I set out to make this film thinking a lot about my own anxiety and sense of dread and grief about the future, and wondering what was political. Is there something political about dread? And I expected to encounter a lot of anxiety. That's sort of what I assumed. We're all anxious, and part of the question was, how is that anxiety generalized? How is it manifesting itself? How are people coping with it? And one of the things that surprised me was that people actually expressed a lot of optimism, or seeming optimism, about the future when I'd asked that question. But it often seems like their way of feeling optimistic or articulating their optimism was often in terms of sort of what they needed to do, what we need to do as individuals. So, this thing is going badly. This is the situation I'm dealing with my housing and my job, but tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to make this right decision, and I'm going to get this lucky break, and I'm going to, you know, win that thing and I'll be fine.
Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.